Today, I'd like to show you how I like to clean beads to make them all look perfect on the inside. I've made a collection of beads, and then I'll show you with this really thin mandrel first. This mandrel is just a 1 millimeter mandrel, and I typically use water. And the reason why I use water is to make sure that the bead release doesn't get powdery and end up in the studio. There's a percentage of silica in most bead releases, like maybe all bead releases, and I don't want that silica dust to be around in the studio. So I just use a little bit of water. You can use a bucket. Here I'm using the water just from a tap, and I won't clean it right now. What I want to do is I want to scrub using the bead release as a slurry, and I'm scrubbing the inside of the bead. I'll do that on one side, and then I'll flip it over and I'll do it on the other side, and I'll just scrub. And when I first cleaned beads many years ago, this is all I would do, just clean them with the bead release. Run a little bit of water after you're done scrubbing. You can feel it to see if the bead release is all clean, because it's all smooth after that. And you've got two things. You've got a clean bead and you've got a clean mandrel, and you're ready to go. I'm also really careful about keeping the mandrels dry. So I'll give them a good dry and then set them down. The bead, blow a little air on it to clean it up, and you've got sort of a beautiful hole. So I'll just keep on doing that, picking up the beads, cleaning them. Now, if I had something, we're going to keep on going through all the beads that I have here. So here I've done a little series of mini beads that are 3 beads on a mandrel, and I'll do the same thing. I'll get them wet. Typically, if I have a big bundle of them, I'll just stick them all in a bucket of, a little container of water in the sink and let them soak, and then afterwards pull them out and clean them one at a time. So I'll give them a scrub, make sure they're wet, and once they're wet, I'll hold onto all 3 of them and I'll scrub, and then I'll flip them over and then scrub the other side. And I guess here's the question: why don't I just use a diamond Dremel tool and then buzz little diamond Dremel tool inside each bead? And the reason is I actually just like this better. I like how low tech it is, and I'd prefer to clean them now. Let's say I made 100 beads. I don't want to take them off the mandrel and then clean them. And it feels like I'm just touching them 200 times instead of 100. What's that? If I made 100 beads. So here I am cleaning them with the water, flip it over the other side, and you can see just with the bead release and the water, you get a pretty clean hole. Now, if you wanted to make them a little cleaner, let's do the same thing with the mini beads. I will get them wet, give them a little slurry here, and scrub them, and I'll leave on the slurry of bead release because that's a really good medium for holding on to silicon carbide grit. So I have a little dish here, and I'm going to dip the tip of my mandrel in the silicon carbide and then use it inside the bead. And you can hear it. It scrubs, feels a little gritty. What I'm using right there is, let's see, I have 220 grit. I got this from HIS GLASSWORKS, and I'll have the link down below. So I have a little 220 grit in there. But you can make it smoother if you want and get a finer grit. But 220 is the one I usually start with. And then once it's scrubbed, again, you can use a bucket of water or a little drip in your faucet. I'll rinse it, and you'll have a hole that's even cleaner. And what I like about that is it's slightly smooth. You can really see that you got all of the bead release. There's no residue. And so you have sort of a beautiful bead hole. Now, let's see if you had something a little bit bigger. So this is a 6mm mandrel. And I am going to, again, get it wet and scrub it. And I did this one so that you could really see the interior, and look at that slurry on there. I'm going to scrub it with my silicon carbide grit. And I started this bead, the first couple wraps I did on there were a dark opaque red. And I did that so that you could really see if any residue is left. I also did that with the mini beads. I did them in a dark color because if you saw any residue, it would be sort of a white, and that's sort of a telltale sign that you didn't get all of the bead release out. So that's why I wanted to show it with this. I think that that's all you need to do. I'll flip it over one more time and do it on the other side. Keep in mind, if you are going to, let's say, put a rivet in this or plan it for some silver jewelry, any kind of jewelry, doesn't have to be silver, you can make this hole a little bit bigger by scrubbing it. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you've already, prepared the metal for it, you can see how nice that is. So I'll put this down. And then you can really see that you've cleaned out the hole there. All right, now I'll show you on a very long bead what I do. So this bead is, I don't know, good over 2.5 inches long. And when you have that much bead on a mandrel, oftentimes what happens is it will really grab onto the mandrel, and the bead release, if you get it wet, will kind of jam and it'll be difficult to take the bead off. So I'll use pliers. I prefer to use the pliers out here at the end and not right next to the bead because I don't want to mark up my, my mandrel at all. So I'll use it here at the end. Some people like to use locking pliers, but I don't. They're a little bit bulky, so I just like my little basic pliers right here. And I will not get it wet yet. So this is the one case where I'm careful not to breathe any dust particles, but I'm also careful to take it off slowly. And once it starts to move, you can kind of pull that out. You can see how the dust is the bead release is just coming off. And then once it's out, then I will add water and use that to scrub the inside hole. And it's interesting, I mean, I don't want to say that you don't have to be careful about cleaning any of your beads, but something that is opaque like this and long, you really don't see inside that hole. So I'm not going to worry about like getting it down to a perfect polish inside a bead that's shaped like this, because you really can't see in there. You want the hole to be nice, of course. You don't want to have any residual bead release in there that will make a mess of your stringing or any of the plans that you have for turning this into a piece of jewelry or a decorative object. And then a little bit of water. So I haven't edited out any of the scrubbing time. I want you to know that this is really simply how I do it. So that bead is now smooth and clean, and quite beautiful, those holes. Now, what if, I did a little test here, what if you had a clear bead, you know, one that is completely transparent? You know, here I didn't put any decoration on this one because I wanted you to see how we can go further and really polish the inside. So because the bead release is, I would say it's sort of like chalky, when you take the bead off and you have a transparent bead, you're always going to see that line in there. And it just depends how much of that, this one's a little bit stiff, how much of that line do you want to see? How much do you mind that it is a little bit matte is the finish, so that you can really see that line across there. Let's see, I'll just do a really simple scrub, and then I'm going to dry it off, and then I'll show you exactly what it looks like just with this simple scrubbing. And then I will get some finer and finer grit, and we'll see how polished we can make this hole. Okay, so there it is, a simple scrub. And we'll take a look at this. Oh, let me do it also with this big one. So I did a big one so that we'd have more area in the hole in order to see. So let me scrub that one too. Okay. And again, keep in mind that when you scrub these, in order to make the holes a little bit nicer, you're also taking off material, which I found is a really good thing, because it helps me make, like if I'm going to make a rivet, it helps me, I have a rivet video if you want to go back and check it. It helps me make that rivet really, really tight if I know I can take off a little bit of material on the glass. Okay, so there's my scrub, and you can get other grits as well. So I said that this here is a 220 grit. If you want to go further, let's see, I have 400 and 600. So I'm going to go through, the higher the number, the finer the grit. I am going to go through and make, well, I don't need to make separate jars, so I'll just open up my little container and then dip into each one, being very careful to keep them all separate so that I don't mix them. You don't want to contaminate something that's a fine grit, let's say 600, with any 220 in there. So you want to make sure that you're careful about keeping them separated. So I have a 220, a 400, and then the 600. So I'm going to go through those. I don't need to do the 220 again because I already did it. So I'll leave that there. And let's see, I will start, and I'll do the small one first. So let's see, we're going to 400, which is this one. And get your mandrel a little bit wet, and then it'll stick. And then all you have to do is scrub. So I'm giving it a little bit of pressure on the sides of the hole. I'm sort of pushing and I'm twisting at the same time. So I'm spinning. So I don't want to always push against one side of the hole, because then that would be an uneven hole and then you wouldn't get a good polish. Once you feel like it's a little bit smooth, I'm going to add a little bit more, and I'm just going to scrub. I'm going to keep on going. And let's see, let's move this so that you can see better. Rinse it off. And then, so I think that it's almost like sanding, well, anything, but if you think about, you know, something that you might have done before, sanding a piece of wood, then it's the same principle. You want to make sure you completely sand at this level. You know, for us it's 400 right now. And before you move on to the next one, because if you have any scratches or any little blemishes, You can't get them out with a finer grit. You have to stay here and scrub. Silicon carbide, we used all the way up to 600, but you can go further than that. And I have pumice stone, pulverized pumice stone in a 2F, and I also have a 4F. So that is, the 4F is a finer grit. And I will use that to even take that surface even finer. And then beyond that, I can use cerium. So when I do that, I like to use dowels instead of the mandrels. And you can get, basically these are skewers of all different sizes. And I have one that fits really nicely into this 3/32 or 2mm bead, and I'll use that dowel. And then I have another one that fits really nicely into this 6mm or the 1/4 inch hole. So I'll make sure that I keep that silicon carbide out of the way, and I am going to use a little bit of water in order to keep the dowel wet so that the pumice, let's start with the 2F, the pumice will grab it and I can scrub the inside of the bead. So now we're going into polishing. So this won't take off a lot of material, but it will leave a really silky smooth interior to your bead. And this might be all that you need. I mean, really, you could just stop at any step along the way, depending on what you're looking for. A lot of times I just, stop at that 220 or 400 and don't go any further than that. But if you really want a satiny finish, or you have a piece that it's going to just be a one-of-a-kind bead that may never be turned into a piece of jewelry. It might just stay as an individual object, or you want to take a really nice photograph of it, or it's going to go into an exhibition somewhere. Then take your time and really work on making those holes really beautiful. So we'll do the 2F pumice, and then make sure you clean it, because you don't want to contaminate before you go to the next level. You could even use a separate dowel, for the different pumices. You can go on to 4F pumice, and then scrub and clean out that hole. And then this is the part that, okay, would I like to automate this? Maybe. You could cut off a little piece and then stick that into an electric drill and then really drill those holes and get that job done a lot faster. Or you can sort of enjoy sitting down, listening to some music, talking to a friend, a little education on a podcast, watch a YouTube video, and polish the inside of your bead. Okay, so now we got those done. All right, cerium is next. Clean that off. Potentially go to a new wooden dowel, because you don't want those dowels to grab onto any material and contaminate your next level. And then the cerium oxide I have in this bag, and that, again, just get in there and polish. And then my experience with polishing glass has been that the cerium is really nice when you can get it to like really heat up, a really strong surface against those edges. And I've been told that sometimes you really need to have that heat in order to heat up that surface of the glass to get that super fine polish. I don't do a lot of fine polishing of my glass, so I'm really not the expert in that. And what I've been able to do, like this by hand, has been good enough. So if it's something that you want to kind of go down that avenue, then, you know, you can get maybe a little automated and see how polished you want to make the inside of your bead. All right, there you go. Dry this off. Just doing this example gives me an idea of like wanting to make more of these beads that are transparent, because I think that they're quite, that's kind of beautiful. Okay. Well, there you have it. How I like to clean beads, from big holes to teeny tiny holes, and silicon carbide and pumice and cerium. And if that was helpful, spread the word. If you know anybody else that would benefit from this information, please send it out there. Write down in the comments any questions or comments you have about how you like to clean your beads, and let's share the information. Have a great day.